Hello lovelies, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today we have my September wrap up. How on God's green earth is it October already? So this month was a pretty average month for me in terms of how much I read. Pretty solid in terms of quality. So I'm going to start off with the statsy bits, same as last time, and then I'll go into a shortish review on all the books. Shortish because I have got to be in a meeting in 20 minutes. So I'm trying to jam this in before I have to be off lunch break and back on Teams. Right, stats. So this month I read 8 books, and between those 8 books I read 2,652 pages, which averages out at an average of 88 pages a day. So from an author demographic perspective, this is quite an unusual month for me because 3 of the books I read were by women and 5 were by men, which completely bucks the trend for the whole year, and also only 1 was an author of colour. So though I am trying to read more diversity, I'm not super upset because actually the demographic that I've probably read least from over the entirety of this year is white men. So the fact that I've read a few of those in September isn't the end of the world, and actually makes my reading more diverse, if that makes sense, because they're the demographic I've read least from. Okay. 1 book was translated, and that was translated from the Japanese. Now I'm going to go through some stats that I didn't do last time, using some of the graphics from Storygraph. So for those that aren't familiar, Storygraph is a book tracking website and app. I'll link my Storygraph below so that you can check out what I'm reading, and yeah, I'll just show you some of the stats that you can get from that platform. So looking at page number per book, 3 of the books that I read were under 300 pages, 1 was over 500 pages, and then the other 4 were between 300 and 500. So I would say the majority of what I read is in that 300 to 500 bracket. I generally don't read that many books under 300 pages, but this month and last month I seem to have read a few, so you know, maybe my tastes are changing, but we'll see. I also read 1 non-fiction book this month, so that accounts for 13% of my reading. And then if we look at format, 3 of the books that I read were via audiobooks, 2 were physical, and the remaining 3 were ebooks. And then star rating wise, I gave 2 books 3-star, and the other 6 were all 4-star reads. So pretty solid. No 5 stars this month, but overall a pretty solid reading month. Okay, so let's kick on with the books that I read. So the first book I finished this month was House of Names by Colm. This is a myth retelling. It retells the myth of Clytemnestra, who, spoiler alert if you're not aware of the myth, but this happens like right at the beginning of the book. Clytemnestra murders her husband Agamemnon when he returns from Troy, and it is her story. So what leads her to the decision to kill her husband, and what is the aftermath of that decision. I really like this book. I really like the writing style, so I'm definitely keen to pick up more by this author. What I wasn't expecting, but I really loved, was that it was multiple POV. So we had Clytemnestra's perspective, but we also had the perspective of her 2 children, Electra and I want to say Orestes. If I've got that wrong, it was the first book of the month. Give me a break. So yeah, really great book. Love the way it explored the different perspectives around the the main character that you would know from the myth. And yeah, I would highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in Greek mythology. It was definitely a different take and a different writing style to those that I have read before. And I gave this one 4 stars. The next book I finished was another audiobook, and that was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This book probably doesn't need that much introduction. It's obviously a great American classic. Pretty much everyone has at least heard of it, if not watched the Leo DiCaprio movie. And this story broadly follows our main protagonist, whose name escapes me, Nick. He moves next door to a very rich man. He lives in a little cottage next to a mansion where Jay Gatsby lives and has very decadent parties, lots of people around, And when he meets Gatsby, he realises that Gatsby has an ulterior motive to hosting these parties and living where he's living. And the story goes from there. And I guess broadly you could call it a love story. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked the characters. I thought they were interesting. They had interesting shades of grey. I thought the story overall, the plot was good, but it was just too short. I didn't feel invested in any of the character arcs because I didn't know them well enough. I think I would have got more from it if I'd read it physically rather than on audio, because some of the interactions between characters, I just wasn't picking up on them very well on the audio. I did watch the movie, well, most of the movie. I did fall asleep before the end. Afterwards, to see if that added anything to it, and it did a little bit. But yeah, for me, I went into it with quite a lot of expectation that it was going to be something that blew my socks off, and it didn't. So, no 3 stars. It was fine. Is it one of my favourite classics? No. The next book I finished was, in fact, a buddy read of Hamnet. I buddy read this with the lovely Nikki over at Red Dot Reads. I will link her details below. This book follows really the mother of Hamlet, the wife of Shakespeare, Agnes, and how she met Shakespeare and obviously had her children, and then what happened to them in, is it 17th century? 16th century, apologies. Only just, 1596. In 16th century Britain. I really enjoyed this. This has a beautiful writing style. The character of Agnes was really addictive to read. She was really, really interesting. There was sort of herb woman witchy vibes going on, which I wasn't expecting and loved. There was great portrayal of sibling dynamics and mother-child dynamics. And yeah, overall, I thought this was a fantastic book. I would absolutely pick up more by Maggie A. Farrell. For me, I felt that I was a bit spoiled. So I'd seen a lot of reviews of this on BookTube that had discussed what happens to Hamlet. And so I kind of thought that was going to happen at the beginning of the book, and it didn't happen till very close to the end. And so it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be going in. And I think had I not had any expectations, this may have scored higher. But I really loved it. It was great. It was really fun to buddy read for Nikki, and yeah, would recommend. The next book I picked up was on my Kindle, and that is In the Woods by Tana French. This is a sort of thriller, police procedural book where we are following a main character who is an unreliable narrator. He is a policeman. He is called to investigate a crime in the town where he grew up. But what the people around him don't know, apart from his partner, is that he was actually involved in a crime there when he was a child, and 2 of his friends went missing and were never found. So you find that on right early in the book. That's like the first chapter, so I'm not spoiling anything. But he is called back to investigate the murder of another child in the same woods where his friends went missing, and it's about him trying to discover what happened to this child, discover if that is linked to what happened to his friends in the past, and how his judgment is clouded by those events. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was well fleshed out. The character dynamics, particularly between the main character and his partner, were fantastic. The sort of conclusion at the end was really brilliantly done. I liked that ending a lot, which I often don't in thrillers. I often feel like they're rushed and a bit slapdash, but this I thought was really well executed. And yeah, I will definitely pick up more Tana French because I really enjoyed this one. Oh, and I gave that 4 stars also. The next book I finished was another ebook and another buddy read. So I read The Appeal by Janice Hallett. This I buddy read with Danny from... Oh, Danny, you've just changed your channel name. I can't remember what it is. I'm going to just insert some text somewhere of her new channel name so that I don't get it wrong. But yeah, The Appeal by Janice Hallett. Gave this one 4 stars. Read this on Kindle. And this was a really, really fun book to read. So this is all told in emails, text messages. And I guess the first half of the book is trying to work out who gets murdered, and then the second half of the book is trying to work out who murdered them. So there's almost 2 mysteries, and I quite like the way that the reader was trying to guess it all the way through from the clues in the emails and stuff. The ending fell a little bit flat for me. It was fine, and I mean, I've seen other people review this, and I think they're right in saying that because it's written in emails and letters, etc., when the reveal came, it was just a bit like, oh, okay. But the ride was so much fun that I can almost forget that, because I really enjoyed reading all the way through. The other thing, though, that was slightly annoying was that these people were emailing in the way that you would text someone. It's like no one really has conversations like these people were having on email. That was a bit weird, but I can overlook it because I thought it was an interesting concept, and it definitely kept me engaged. The next book that I finished was Empire of Pain by Keefe Radden. This was on audio, if I didn't already say that, and this is a non-fiction, and this follows the Sackler family, who are responsible for launching and marketing OxyContin in the US and effectively causing the current opioid crisis that they have over there. So this goes sort of right back to the first person in their family who got involved in the pharmaceutical industry, and interestingly enough, he produced and marketed Valium, and then from there his subsequent generations upped the ante effectively and started selling OxyContin onto the market and marketing it in a very, very dangerous way. which caused a high number of people in the population to become addicted to opioids. This was really eye-opening for me. It's not a subject area that I'm super up to speed with. I live in the UK, so I don't know that much about the opioid crisis over in the US. But I thought it was a really important book to read. It kind of shows you the lack of morality of quite a lot of people in the pharmaceutical and chemical industries in general. The level of corruptness, if that is even a word, in politics, the FDA, and the ability for companies, people of a certain income to buy their way out of problems. And yeah, I thought it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. There was some, what I would call filler in it. I mean, there was a whole chapter on the artwork that the granddad bought that I didn't think was really necessary. Just say he bought a lot of works of art and spent a lot of money. That's fine. That's all I need to know. Let's get back to the drugs. But yeah, so there was quite a lot of filler in there. It was over 500 pages. I think it probably could have been done in under 400 and still hit the same notes. But apart from that, a great book. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, modern issues and drug crises, then yeah, it was really interesting. I need to speed things up a bit because my meeting starts in 4 minutes. So the next book I read was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This follows a woman who tries to commit suicide and gets stuck in between life and death in the Midnight Library. From there, she can effectively undo regrets and live the life that she would have lived if she'd made a different decision. I really enjoyed this book. I flew through it in like a few days. It's not very big, and it's really compelling. And it was, considering it is about suicide, and there is trigger warnings in here for self-harm as well, it's actually a really light-hearted and quite uplifting book. And I loved it. I loved the main character, Nora. I liked the way she grew through the book. Yeah, I thought it was fab. And the fact that though there is a little bit of a romance angle in this, it wasn't the main focus of the book. So I was really pleased because I thought the last thing I want is to get to the end and actually her happy end ever after is with a man. And that doesn't happen. So I was happy about that situation. That might be a spoiler for the end, but hopefully not too much of a spoiler. But yeah, so that was that one. Apologies, rush in the end because I now have 3 minutes before my meeting starts. And the last book I read was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is translated from Japanese, and you are in a cafe in Japan. I'm not sure exactly where in Japan actually. And in this cafe, you can return to the past in some situations, but only until your coffee goes cold, and then you return to the present. I did like this book. However, for me, it felt like short stories. So for those that have read it, you probably know what I mean, but it splits into 4 sections and you follow 4 different characters. Though there is follow through with some of the characters, it just felt quite short story to me. Then I struggled to get invested each time it shifted to a new chapter. I struggled to get back into it. I felt like the flow was a bit stop-start. That said, I loved the premise. I thought it was a nice, light, easy read. There are some heavier topics in there, So there are, again, some trigger warnings here. But yeah, it was good. It was fine. It was 3 stars. Probably won't bother picking up the sequel, but not upset that I've read it or anything like that. So yeah. Right, and that is the 8 books. And I'm really sorry that I've rushed this end bit, but, you know, slave to time. So thanks very much for listening. And I will catch you in the next one.